Welcome back to a brand new video of the Target Individual Program, Target Individual Experience. Alright, so it's after 10, a little after 10, just check the bus schedule. Said that the bus will be here in 1 minute, so I'm not going to make that. But guess what time the other bus is going to be arriving? In 46 minutes. Alright, this is a Friday night, 10 o'clock. And again, I have to wait almost 50 minutes. You can say almost an hour. Let's round it up. Almost an hour for a bus, right? Just at 10 o'clock at night, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. So, Pam went out tonight, and NY Predators Department, trying to engage in that intimidation, coercive threat, that sort of thing. And I'm just there laughing. Every time I head towards the door, they use the sirens, right? Every time I say, okay, I was doing laundry. I did like 2 loads, because it was just, she's not gonna do the laundry. She had laundry in there for the longest while. Look. Come on. White guy come out the building, right? White guy come out the building. You know what I'm saying? The Negropeans and the white racists. The Negropeans and the white racists. They can't help it. They're in love with whiteness too much. Me, I understand whiteness. I understand the criminality of the white mind when it comes to having any sort of relationship with black people. It is of a criminal nature. But anyway, just want to show you guys again how they do certain things. Right? Oh look, NY Predators Department across the street. Look at that. I see their lights flashing. Right? Look at that. Maybe turn that around. I thought I flipped the camera around. It's a good thing I looked to see. See, I always gotta look to see at my phone, right? Because this is what they'll do. I flipped the camera around, and at least I thought I did. Maybe I did flip it. I don't know if they flipped it back, but hey. But anyway. So I decided to do 2 loads of laundry, and it was just too much. She wasn't going to do it. I spoke to her yesterday about it. I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll do some of the laundry. She was like, some of the laundry? I said, yeah, some of the laundry. I said, yeah, some of the laundry. It's like, what, you expect me to do all the laundry? Hell no. I only did the children's clothes. That's the only thing. That's all I did. I did 2 loads of their clothes. Like I said, she could. I got, last night, reminded her. I said, you always talk about you sick. Your leg hurt, this hurt. I said, but you remember what you told me a long time ago? That as tired as you are, sick as you are, when it comes to going out, you can always find the energy. Your sickness will be healed momentarily, temporarily, until you finish having your fun, then you come back, then you get sick. That's her logic, right? So, so I'm just like, so I reminded her. She was like, that was so long. I said, no, it's not. And then she was like, well, the kid's gonna do the laundry. I said, nope, you're not doing that. They're not doing the laundry. That's too much laundry, right? That is too much laundry. She's like, well, they can do it. And I said, nope. When I was a teenager, when I did my laundry, my brother's laundry. Right? Sometimes I'll do my mom's laundry, but that's it. My mother never made us go to the laundry to wash all the clothes in the house. No. We wash our own clothes, all right? And, once in a while, we might wash a few things of hers. And so I said to Pam, I said, you just waiting for Alyssa to get older, right? So you could be like Snow White's stepmother, except you're her mother. She's like, no, I'm not. I said, yeah, that's exactly what. You're waiting for her to get older so she can clean up the house for you, right? Same as Ethan. But I already told him, I said, don't do it. The vast majority of the mess in there is made by her, not the children. Okay? And I told her, I said, I'm going to hold you accountable. So you will not be having our children, becoming your servant when it comes to doing housework and cleaning the house. So. You know what I'm saying? I had to put my book back there. Yeah, you know, I can tell that my spine, my back is getting worse because my back feel heavier, and usually, you know, because I'm not carrying much in there, but it feels a lot heavier. You know, I think I'll speak to Alda. She's going through the same thing too with her back. You know, her spine is hitting them nerve, right? And so, you know, but anyhow, you know, so she just, I had to shut up because after I said that, she had nothing to say. I told her, I said, that will not happen. I will not allow that to happen. You know? And I said, listen, I've been telling you all the time, I'm not telling you that you can't go out. I never said that. What I said to you was that it's interesting in how you can always find the energy, as sick as you are. You telling me that you couldn't do laundry because of your heart, right? Because such and such. But yet, you can go out. You can go out. But you can't do laundry because you tell me your heart. You know, you can't do laundry because it's your leg, right? You can't do laundry because you're sick. You can't do laundry because it's your shoulder. And I told her, I said, you have laundry, there's laundry in the basement, right? It's not like, you know, like I said I had to walk a couple of blocks to go do my laundry, okay? You know what I'm saying? You have laundry in the basement, right? So I said to her, I don't want to hear it, you know, because again, and the reason why I said to her, I don't want to hear it, because I'm tired of talking to her. I always remind her, I said, listen, when I was on crutches, I was on crutches for 2 months because I had microterin. I just, you know, I was getting ready to, because the kids was at my house, and Pam had came from work, so she came over, and we were going to go to her house, right? So I had the kids ready to have you. I was on my computer, shut my computer down. I got up, and then I leaned forward to turn the back of my computer off, and I didn't hold on to anything. And literally, it's like my body just went backwards so fast. You ever see those things where, you know, where when you pull it back, it snaps back up, right? That's how I was, literally. And I just had a tingling sensation. And then when I started to walk, I couldn't walk. Literally, I mean, I had my cane and everything, but I still couldn't walk. It took me a while to get to the car, and I was like, you gotta take me to the hospital. And so I went to the hospital. You know, I was there for a little bit. They told me what it was. It was called microtearing of the muscle. And they told me that I gotta be careful when I'm bending because of my back, right? And so from then, I have been very, very cautious in terms of what it is that I do and how I do it. All right? And literally, I couldn't walk. I had to go. I was in a wheelchair, and then they gave me crutches. And I said to her, I said, look, when I was on crutches, I was in so much pain. I get up in the morning, I make the kids breakfast, I get them dressed, and I said to you, I wake you up. I said, Pamela, can you take the kids to school? You told me no, right? You told me no. This is for 2 months. You told me no. Okay? When you came home early and I asked you to pick up a lesson from boys and girls from school, you told me no. You know, you told me you wanted your time for yourself. Right? I said even recently when it happened, you came home early. You could have went by her school and pick up. No, but what did you say? That you got off of work early, you know, so you want to spend that time for yourself. Right? So now when you came in, I had to go back out and get her. You know what I'm saying? I said, but you have always been like that. She was like, well, you know that. I said, yeah, but come on, Pamela. You know, you gotta, you know. But, you know, like she said, she is who she is, and she's not changing for nobody. She says she's too old to change. And I'm like, wow. But yet they want you to change. They want you to change. And they're emboldened by the New York Predator Department and those in law enforcement because they have manipulated our women into engaging in all sorts of, you know, criminal behavior. All right? And they get away with it. All right? Whenever we have an argument, I will constantly hear sirens in the background. constantly. You know what I'm saying? Right? Even when she tried to attack me one day. Actually, when she tried to attack me one day, I didn't hear no sirens at all. Right? I didn't hear no sirens at all. But it's expected because black women, or I should say European women, believe that they can put their hands on us. Right? Because they're being psychologically manipulated by these predators. Right? By these predators over here. By the entire predator department. The police predator department all across America. This is why they behave the way that they behave. You know? I told you, I said I called the cops on a woman who was harassing me and didn't want to leave me alone. I'm like, listen, you know, I'll talk to you tomorrow. You know? Literally grabbing my shirts and stuff. I had to call numerous times and they never showed up. So that right there told me a lot. You know what I'm saying? But let it be the other way around. If I had grabbed her and, you know, tried to fight her, I'd be in handcuffs and in jail. Okay? But like I said, number 32, KEB 5132. Right? But, you know, like I said, I don't fight women, I don't hit women. You know, but I realized what they were doing and how they're manipulating Pam using coercive persuasion programming. Right? And it's done psychologically, right? It's also done through the use of microwave and radio frequencies, right? It's also done through economic means, job promotions and so forth. Also through honey trapping. You know? I mean, it's you know what I'm saying? I can see this plain as day, okay? And as clear as night. But most people don't, right? Most people can't see it. I'm looking at these two here, being the people. All right, so gonna be a while for the bus, so I'm gonna continue this conversation. But anyhow. Right? It is what it is, right? But when they can harass you and try to intimidate you, right? And like I tell them, I'm not afraid of them. I will never be afraid of them. And that's why I say it's important that as a black man and as a parent, and black parents should be putting their children in self-defense classes. Okay? I've been saying this for well over a decade now. You can go look at my videos. I talk about how these white supremacists who created these technologies to manipulate us, to control us, and how they want to put us back into slavery. Right? They want to put us back into slavery. But we just don't want to listen because we only want to believe. Right? So here's an interesting statistics, right? Do you know that 30% of conviction, right, is based off of false confession? Right? 30%, well, it's 29%, I round it up to 30%. Of conviction is based off of false confession. So tell me, how is it that these officers, these predator officers, are able to manipulate people into false confession? They would have to be very well skilled and very knowledgeable about psychological manipulation, about torture, right? Because it is torture. You would have to be torturing somebody, because when you look at the reason why they say torture don't work, is because people will tell you whatever you want to hear to stop the torture. But because this is law enforcement, right, that confession will lead to 100% of conviction. right? You understand that? And you have people spending decades in prison for crimes they didn't commit. Then you have some detective who will frame people, plant evidence, plant drugs, to get a conviction because they're racist. They're all racist, but these are the what do you call the predator, dark triad, sociopath, and psychopath, right? These are the darkest of the dark triads. Okay? And then you have some DAs that will hide evidence to prove that the defendant is innocent. And they will hide it. And they will watch an innocent person get convicted of a crime they didn't commit. I always say, Bob Marley, the Honorable Robert Nesta Marley said, you cannot expect justice from a system that is created and run by criminals. Okay, and this is how it is there is no perfect system, but this justice system here is the worst. It is one of the worst. Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of talk about Iran being the #1 terrorist state in the world, and I'm just like, okay, well, let me tell you, let's put it to the test. Let's put it to the test. Let's see who's the real terrorist nation is. Okay? So when these pundits want to get on television and say stuff like that, right? When have Iran ever kidnapped another nation's president? Has Iran ever assassinated another nation's president? Okay? Maybe, I don't know. Tell me, show me. Has the Iranian government ever allowed drugs to come in and participate in drug trafficking, right, to its minority communities? Has Iran ever did that? Has Iran ever poisoned an entire town of its citizens? Has they ever did that? Have Iran ever fund revolution and installed dictators to brutally assault the people of that nation so that Iranian corporations and businesses can exploit and profit off of those nations' natural resources and exploit their people? Answer that. Has Iran, ever engaged in mind control program, engaging in drugging entire populations of people, right? Have they ever done that? Answer that. Have Iran ever invaded another nation and where the drug trade increased 700% and then leave and the drug trade fell to 30%, right? Have Iran ever did that? Have Iran ever operate clandestine operations in other nations, sovereign nation, without those nation leaders knowing about these operations? Have Iran ever did that? Have Iran ever installed malware and spyware on the phones of its allies? Have Iran ever did that? Have Iran ever look Predator Department, right? Have Iran, I can go on. I can go on. Right? I can go on. Have Iran, right? Have Iran ever, right? Have the Iran ever allow its elites to engage in all the crimes, the pedophilia, the drugging, the killing, the hunting of minority group people? What else? Have Iran ever told its allies to not trade with the United States, to not allow their oil to go to the United States? to not allow their technology to go to the United States? Have Iran ever did that? So I can go on. I can go on. Have Iran ever manipulated an entire group of people into hating each other, right? Into creating a gender warfare between those group of people, men and women and children? Have Iran ever did that? Have Iran ever lynched black people? Have the educators in Iran ever draw bullet wound marks or put bullet wound makeup on children, on black children in their nation? Have Iran ever did that? Have Iran made it so comfortable, right? So comfortable in where you see its police force brutalize, oppress, frame, plant drugs, evidence on citizens of its nation? Have Iran ever did that? So again, I can go on. I can go on. Right? I can go on. But it's a lot. It's a lot. So when I hear about Iran being the #1 terrorist nation in the world, I have to laugh. It's a lie. It's a lie. We engage in all sorts of criminality abroad and here in the United States against our own citizens, against other migrants, right? And we do the same in other nations, right? Where it is do as we say, and what we do to you, you cannot do to us because we will go to war over it. So when you want to talk about a terrorist nation, and a nation that has experimented on me, has microchipped me, has its police force try to set me up, try to do all kinds of things, and you want to talk about terrorist nation? Man, come on now. See, they don't want me on those shows.